Okay, let's call to order the June 28th meeting of the Peters Township Council. Mr. Bauer, the roll call, please.
Mrs. Merrill? Present. Mr. Steigel? Here. Mr. Arcuri? Here. Mr. Ball?
Present.
Mr. Berquist? Here. Mr. Kozer?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Here. Rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Very nice to see our police department with us this evening. Thank you for everybody for coming out.
No need to hit the panic button.
You don't need the panic button.
Well,
At least for the next proceeding.
next 15 minutes, anyway.
Yeah.
Dying to try that out some night. Okay, first item of business is the approval of minutes from the council meeting held on June 14th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
One correction, sir, minor. Under 5A, letter of support for the proposed change to the PCSA bylaws, the word offers should be authorized. That would be the only change I would ask.
Okay.
I have no problem with that.
All right. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on to special reports. Presentation of Officer Klein and Officer Merritt. Chief.
Yes, sir. Thank you. If it's okay, I'm going to stand over here for this. Just wanted to introduce to our citizens who are here and council our two newest hires initially. Officer Austin Klein is currently a resident of Springdale Borough. However, he does intend to move into the area in the very near future. Officer Klein grew up in Springdale Borough, and upon graduating from Springdale High School, he attended Waynesburg University, where he earned his bachelor's degree in criminal justice administration. And even though he didn't want me to mention it, oh, by the way, he played football. You'll see that when he gets up. Shortly after graduating from Waynesburg, Officer Klein accepted a position with the Arlington County Police Department in Arlington County, Virginia. During his tenure there, Officer Klein was a member of the department's Criminal Disturbance Unit, Sexual Assault Response Team, and Crisis Intervention Team. As a member of the Civil Disturbance Unit, Officer Klein responded to the District of Columbia for both the June 2020 riots and the White House and the insurrection at the United States Capitol building on May 6, 2021, for which he received the Ribbon of Valor. Officer Klein holds certifications in Arlington County's Department of Human Services and Arlington County Police Crisis Intervention Team. He achieved a level 1 public order officer with Arlington PD in his short time there. Officer Klein is honored to have been given this opportunity and looks forward to serving the residents of Peters Township. Officer Klein, please stand.
He doesn't look like a running back.
Welcome.
I was going to say flanker's probably out of it, too.
Our next officer, newest hire, is Officer Nicole Merritt. Officer Merritt grew up in Collier Township, graduating from Sharkey's Valley High School in 2013. Officer Merritt then attended Point Park University, earning her bachelor's degree in intelligence and national security and her master's degree in intelligence and global security. She began her law enforcement career as a criminal intelligence analyst with the investigations unit of the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office. Most recently, she worked for the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police as an analyst in the Crime Analyst Unit. In addition, she would assist with operations in the Intelligence Unit and the Real-Time Crime Center. Officer Merritt graduated from the IUP Criminal Justice Training Center just this past Saturday. She was the class president and valedictorian of her Act 120 training class. As a police officer, Officer Merritt is most looking forward to applying her analytical and investigative background to help her solve law enforcement issues and community-related concerns. She's eager to engage our community and serve the residents of Peters Township. Officer Merritt.
Welcome.
Move right on.
Please.
Captains, just block you again,
Gotcha.
unfortunately, ma'am.
I'll slide.
Stand a long period, you have to go slide down. The other reason that we're here today, in the interest of brevity and heat moving things along. Shorten this a little bit. I'm just going to read the bios of our two most recent promotees. The first of which is Corporal Spencer Scott. Spencer was born and raised in Upper St. Clair, where he graduated from Upper St. Clair High School in 2009. Upon graduation, he attended Ohio University, where he received a bachelor's degree in sociology and psychology. Following graduation from Ohio University, Spencer accepted a position with the City of Pittsburgh Police Department, where he served 4 years in Zone 2. Corporal Scott joined the Peters Township Police Department in 2018. Since his hire date, Corporal Scott has demonstrated proficiency and responsibility by taking on various roles within the department, to include he is one of our SWAT operators with the Shaycog SWAT team. He's a firearms instructor, a field training officer, and the lead coordinator for our traffic enforcement efforts in the township. Corporal Scott resides in the township with his fiancee Sarah, who's here. Wave, Sarah. He takes great pride in this community and his role as a police officer, and he too is looking forward to serving the residents of this community and leading the men and women of this department. Corporal Scott.
Congratulations.
I would add Spencer has done a great job in the short time that he's been here and has shown a lot of growth and leadership already in the roles that he has volunteered to accept along the way here in this short time. Our next, actually Sergeant Gary Oroz. Sergeant Oroz was promoted a while back, but due to the COVID restrictions, we're just now getting to his introduction. Sergeant Oroz currently resides with his wife Melissa in Bethel Park, PA. He received his bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Pittsburgh and attended the Indiana University of Pennsylvania Police Academy. Sergeant Oroz began his career in law enforcement with West Homestead Borough in 1994 and worked there until June 27, 1999, when he accepted a position with the Peters Township Police. Sergeant Oroz was promoted to corporal in 2018 and sergeant in December 2020. Sergeant Oroz has served as detective, field training officer, and he is our lead coordinator for the Citizens Police Academy, which has been a huge success. Sergeant Oroz is honored to have been given this opportunity again. He's very excited about what is before him, and he and I have had many conversations about where he expects to go and what he expects to do. Sergeant Oroz, would you come forward?
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think he wants to get a
Yeah, give me some pictures.
Where do you?
If I can get the new
Can we
photos,
go outside and do that?
whatever you'd like.
Want to go out?
Yeah, right there, Mr. Ball. Get the action rolling there.
We'll hold you all up.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming in.
Appreciate your service. Yeah, what's this?
Okay, moving onward, maybe we ought to have a dedication ceremony for our new clock, too.
Yeah.
You know, have a clock that tells time,
The right time.
the right time.
The other one did tell time, but
I think he's sending a message based on the size of the characters of the clock.
yeah.
My age. So what that reflects.
Okay, the next item under special reports, fire station preliminary design report.
Chief McLaughlin and I wanted to bring council up to date on the preliminary design for the fire station. This is very much a work in progress, and based upon preliminary estimates, we think there's going to be revision to this drawing. But what is planned is a is a fairly simple structure. What it is showing here is with 3 bays. Chief McLaughlin and I both feel that perhaps what makes more sense given the size of the bays is to actually eliminate one of those bays and have 2 drive-through bays and as opposed to 3 drive-through bays. Those bays can actually hold not only a fire truck, but they can also hold a squad vehicle inside of that bay. The area that is above has space, bunk space for, what is it, 6, Chief?
6, correct.
6 individuals, and it has a fairly modest space for a kitchen and as well as some office space. So,
with the bunk rooms also, we had to design the separation for male female as well, and that wasn't a challenge, but obviously creates a little more of by separating the bunk space with the hallway and drawing things. There's really not much square footage within the working part of the fire station versus the apparatus bay. The apparatus bay is pretty large. I think that provides us an opportunity to reduce some of the square footage, thus eliminating some of the projected costs as well.
So the initial design for the building, again, is fairly straightforward. It has a pitched roof because we're in that residential area. That's probably going to be a shingled roof. And it's using brick and hardy board for construction materials. So they're standard construction materials in an attempt to keep the cost of the project in line. One of the reasons why we're talking about eliminating that 3rd bay, the initial estimate was that this building, as it is there, is about $4 million. And if you add in a contingency of 10%, it's $4,400,000, which we believe is beyond the scope of where we want to be. So, but it's like I say, it's a work in progress, though.
Hey, Paul, if you decide to do that, would the building be constructed in such a way that if there was a need down the road to add that 3rd bay, that we could do that?
Yes, and that's exactly what we want to talk to them about. The other thing is, the reason why that
come for this, if I
well, the reason why that 3rd bay is there is to accommodate in the future perhaps ambulance or something like that. And that bay does not need to be that size to be able to do it. But the idea would be to leave space and configure the building in such a way that you could add on to it. So,
But we'll get an idea how much the difference in cost is between the 2 bays.
oh, yes.
Oh, very much so.
yeah, 'cause it might be better just to do it.
This is a result came of only 3 meetings with the architect, so he's actually very efficient. I think he's done a lot of work in a little bit of time. But, plan for the worst, hope for the best type of thing. And I think we've got a good start. And I think a start is only that. It still has a lot of work to be done. Little things like shifting the location of the building forward and back on the property has the potential to save almost $100,000 because of stormwater management. So taking all those things into consideration, we still have some work to do.
The one thing that we are absolutely positively sure of at this point between Mark and Mike and myself is we have the right architect on this building. He totally understands what it is he's designing in terms of a fire station. So that was a good choice by council.
He kind of made that look like some of the brownstones of Brookwood, with the garage doors the way that they are and the brick colors and the building colors. So I think he kind of gets the futuristic design, but yet modern residential for our community.
Can I ask a question about the interior? The entrance is in the middle of the building, correct? And I was a little surprised because in the remodeled main fire station, you have a different series of doors. And it seems like someone could come in and they would be open to the rest of the station. Are you planning additional, well, first of all, ways to greet somebody because they're coming in at a conference room? And then are you going to control the flow differently with more doors or something like that?
So, yes, and I'll kind of point at the screen to answer your question. This being the main entrance,
Right.
there's door control here, and we've actually even talked about moving the duty room and the conference room, kind of switching them, and that way they could be greeted by the members sitting at the desk.
That would make sense.
He has a door control here which separates pretty much the private portion of the building to the public portion of the building, leaving a restroom accessible to public personnel that might come in, being able to use the conference room in and out with not disturbing what's going on throughout the day.
Chief, are these garage doors, are they glass?
They're a hybrid of glass and metal.
So you'll be able to see through them then?
I don't know that we've gotten so far along that we can tell you exactly what those garage doors are, but
Well, I couldn't tell looking at this whether, that was the idea, that you're going to be able to see the trucks parked in there. Because I have to admit, when I was a kid, that was one of the greatest things. You drove by the old station, you saw the trucks there, but then you guys put the new doors in, and now you can't see them anymore.
It's one of the worst things in the wintertime, too. It's very dark. It's
Right.
and
Doesn't let any light in, yeah.
that's kind of the pride showpiece of what the fire station is, are the fire trucks inside. People want
Right.
to see the fire trucks, whether you're 2 or you're 30. Sorry,
Right, exactly.
you like to see that, and what fire stations are going towards are a lot more efficient glass doors now than we had back in the 90s, and they're a lot lighter as well if you use the right product.
So for the circulation, you'll come in on the upper drive. People would park there if they wanted to visit. The trucks could come in on the upper drive and then circle around the back. And then the lower drive would be your exit?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is an ideal situation because that lower drive would be exit only.
Right.
You would hopefully not have traffic coming into that. That's how the architect has designed it. Because of some of those traffic conflicts that we have at our main station now, he's taken that into consideration and said, hey, no, one-way emergency traffic out only, and created a good flow path for that.
Chief, in the floor plan that's there, the bay lowest on the, what is in there? There's the trench drain, and what is the other lines? That's not a pit, is it?
No, there should not be a pit there. You'll have a center trench.
What those other lines are in there, he's showing you what vehicles would be in there. So those, there was a question about can that station actually house an aerial truck if the aerial truck was down at that location, and the answer is yes.
Never would have guessed, at least from the image here, that that's what that was.
Yeah, so what he has shown there is an apparatus that's 50 feet long inside of that bay. The next bay up, the middle bay, is an apparatus that's 42 feet long, and the next up apparatus is 20 feet long.
And this is in Peters Township's sewage system, right? So we have to have
Peters Creek
Sanitary.
Yeah.
Meaning we have to have a grease trap, I guess, for these drains.
Yes. Yes. There'll have to be some type of oil separation.
Could you give us a timeline on the rest of the process, when you expect to have a final design, and when, just for the listening audience,
The intention of this is to be in a position to have this design developed enough so that when we begin the budget process in September, that we would have a number to work with to incorporate into next year's budget. The idea would be to have this under construction as weather breaks next year so that it would be completed in that construction year.
So related to that, we have a tenant in that building right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have an ETA on talking to him about vacating?
He understands what the situation is. I'll be honest with you. I don't think we're far enough along to have that discussion with him yet. But he understands that's going to occur.
Okay, so as long as he knows we're moving.
He's month to month, isn't he?
Yes, I mean, it's not a problem from that standpoint, but it is, I mean, he's been a long-term tenant in that building. He does need to relocate, and we need to give him adequate notice to be able to do that.
Good. Anything else? Good.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Chief.
Hold on, someone back here, Dave.
Where's this?
Well, you have to come up.
Oh, I have to come up. I'm sorry.
Well, we're very official.
Identify yourself, please.
Excuse me. I'm Irene Changle, and I just moved into the waters from Upper St. Clair.
Welcome.
Thank you. Where is this going to be?
Down Bebout Road, the actual address is
Bebout.
435 Bebout.
Bebout.
Close
The
to
road where the rec
Benicia
center
Road
is.
intersection.
Where the rec center is? Oh, okay.
But towards the beach.
Yeah, down further.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Right before Lake Joanne. Right
Right after, right after Timber.
It's right next to the.
I don't know what that is, but, yeah.
Bob Donnan, 107
Hello, sir.
Southview. Looks like a great roof for solar panels. Good chance for Peters Township to get into it. So I'd price that in too.
We get that electric fire truck.
Do they make that? They're starting. They're starting. Yes, they are.
I figured eventually they would.
Will you have a generator at this building
Yeah,
too?
there's marked on it.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got enough on it, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Chief.
All righty, audience comments, 5 minutes, topics on the agenda. Mr. Brooks.
Ron Books, 855 Bebop. Question I believe it was the last meeting, I brought up the issue of where are we with the aquatic center. And I was under the impression that that might be talked about at this meeting, but I don't see it on the agenda. Is there something in the process?
It is. The architect owes us a report. He could not deliver it for this meeting, so the goal is to have it on next meeting.
Okay, all right, very good. Brentwood, I believe, just spent $4.5 million refurbishing their pool. So swimming pools are quite expensive, regardless. Has any thought been given to, if we proceed with it, the pool construction, is any thought been given to allowing or asking some of our neighboring communities to pitch in or become part of a multi-community design?
I'm not sure what you're asking for sure, but the pool, if it was to be built, would not only accommodate Peters Township residents, although it would be primarily Peters Township residents, it would also be available to people outside the community in terms of having access to it. I don't know that we've got far enough along to understand whether or not we want to have a formal relationship for access to the pool with our neighbors or not, but
I would think we would at least consider it. I know North Strabane at one time was considering a pool, and I think they turned that off because of the proposed costs. Very, very expensive proposition regardless, which was why I was hoping to hear that we might ask the surrounding communities to engage in a corporate effort to facilitate the pool, should we decide to go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Donnan? Yes. Is the overhead projector on the wall?
you know what? I do. Let's find out.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Bob Donnan, 107 Southview Court. Good evening, Council and Township staff. Over the past pandemic year, my wife and I have spent several days a week walking portions of Arrowhead Trail in Peterswood Park. It's quite impressive what our township's created when it comes to sports facilities and recreational opportunities. However, it's far less impressive to see the large number of dead and dying trees left standing in the park, often close to where people walk, bike, or jog. As a retired landscape nurseryman, I'm well aware of the deadly hazards created by these trees called widowmakers. So I have been contacting council members directly while also using the PT4Me webpage on a regular basis. While I've noticed that some of those trees have been cut down or completely removed, it's rather alarming to see the slow progress being made on remaining hazards to life and limb. Tragically, less than 2 weeks ago, a young couple was hiking in an Upper St. Clair Park when they were struck by a large hollow branch, which resulted in the man being paralyzed and the death of the 40-year-old woman the following day. The couple has 2 young boys whose world has been forever changed. Bob Mayo of WTAE TV filed this report.
You know what? It is not functioning, but if you want, you can pass that down and people can see that.
I'll hand it out at the other meeting. Anyway, it's Bob Mayo. He's standing next to this large hollow branch. So I don't know if the branch had leaves on it or not, but you can see the decay was very advanced, and that branch fell and struck down. And she had, it's kind of a sad story, beyond just the death and the man being paralyzed. She just started a pastry business in Mount Lebanon just maybe 2 years ago. And there's some different pictures on her pages of things she's created. And for anyone interested, there is a GoFundMe page that one of her friends has set up. It's called Kara's Boys, K-A-R-A'(S) Boys. And her friend writes, "Hi, my name's T. According to my friend Kara, Kara's family is who I'm raising money for. Kara and her husband Jared went for a hike last night and a large tree branch fell on them. Kara didn't make it through the experience and Jared's paralyzed. Kara's a wife to her fantastic husband and a mother of 2 beautiful boys. Kara also was a great baker, owning a little bake shop that specialized in nut-free cakes. Kara's boys are going to need a lot of love, care, and support without their wonderful mother by their side anymore. And her husband, who will be dealing with the loss of his wife, but part of his body too, he's going to need to revamp his whole life, missing his other piece. In lieu of flowers, any donation is welcome to help Kara's boys revamp their lives." So this I see on their, as of last night, they're up to $227,000 on their GoFundMe page. So back to Peterswood Park. And again, I can actually email all the council members a PDF of this. Back to Peterswood Park, my ongoing concerns. Here's a perfect example, one I'll call the perfect mousetrap, which an attorney might call an attractive nuisance. So here you see one of the exercise pieces of equipment, the body curl, and towering over that exercise piece of equipment is a dead tree that must be about 40 or 50 feet tall, and it's good size. So you just never know when one of those is going to come down. And then another example, just down the trail from there, is a dead tree. It's been dead so long that even the conchs, you know, the mushroom type things that grow out of a dead tree are dying. So how many years has that been dead? And you can see that one, it's right by that one wooden bridge down at the 180, if you go down from the rec center, down that way. So in closing, I'd say my foremost recommendations would include to become proactive instead of reactive, since the longer a dead tree stands, the greater risk it is to passerbys and tree cutting crews. You know, once each trees are dead standing for a long time, when they're cutting them, they can have a big branch hit them. So I would scout the park for dead and dying trees, initially the ones closest to parking lots, trails, and exercise stations, and then move thoroughly on a semi-annual basis throughout the park with the primary goal of getting hazardous trees cut down and lying on the ground. Any required cleanup can come later. And finally, begin to focus on aggressive grapevines and other vines, ones that are now smothering and weakening trees by cutting them off. Just go through there and cut the vines at the base and let them die up in the trees. Crews could do that during slow winter periods, after grass cutting and field maintenance is ended. And I noticed an article by Harry today in the Almanac about Bethel Park. They're being proactive on a tree program. So you might want to segue with them and see what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I'm glad Mr. Donnan brought that up because I wanted to discuss that later. It's a terrible story, obviously, what happened in Upper St. Clair. I mean, I presume that we regularly, you know, monitor Peters Lake Park and the trail and the park, you know, make sure that if something that's dead is overhanging the paths that we're taking them down. But
and the problem is that this problem has grown so large, and we do actively go in. So, for instance, what you're going to see shortly, if it hasn't already happened, inside the amphitheater at the those trees that are in that center section that are diseased are all coming down. And so it isn't that we're not paying attention to this, but I will tell you this problem is not only with inside the park and along the trails, it's on your open spaces you own. We just had a tree drop out of the edge of the new Rolling Hills Park across somebody's fence. And so it isn't that we're not paying attention to this, but the scale of this is not something that's going to be easily addressed.
No, Paul, and, I live near Peters Lake, and I probably sent you a dozen emails over troubled trees, and I probably have had...
And you've removed trees for us.
Taken down about almost probably 8 trees out of my own pocket that have been threatening to people that make access through my yard to gain into the property.
Well, and
it is a very serious thing. I've been there when a tree came down and people had to run from underneath it.
Well, and realistically, we can't cut down every dead tree in every township park and every open space. It's just what's all we would do is cut trees 24/7, 365. And the issue just becomes, how do you keep the walking paths clear? I mean, obviously, if you're walking through Peters Lake, you want to make sure that nothing above you is going to come down. But I mean, if someone ventures off and decides they're going to go walking off the beaten path.
But when there's a tree, as like Bob has pointed out, that's near an area where we're asking people to gather, that piece of exercise equipment, that's one that needs to be taken down. So,
and my hat's off to the Public Works Department, because when there have been some hazards, they've been out there within, I'll say, 48 hours to remedy the conditions. So I'm only one person, and I'm only seeing a limited number of what I'm looking at based on the trail location.
I mean, is there any reason for us to consider in the parks putting signs that say "Stay on trail, don't get off the"? Which you hate to do, because then you're telling residents not to use a portion of the park. But
I don't think that's the solution.
Ron Books again. I don't know how many years in a row I've brought this issue to council about dead trees. They are a real problem. I lived in New England. I saw it. Every nor'easter that came through, we had roads full that many people died because of delinquent tree management. That's what I'll call it. Under the circumstances, I'd like to see, for example, our police department, who have regular street patrols. They're equipped with GPS units. They know where their vehicle's located at. They can identify potential hazards and report them to our maintenance units so that they could be removed. But they are a very big hazard, and I would hate to think of what would happen if one of those trees were to fall on a school bus, for example. So please consider what's been said here with a great deal of earnest, and come up with some sort of a plan. Maybe there's some grants that we could get from the state or from the federal government to cover some of the costs. Just some thoughts. Thank you.
It would seem like this would have to be one of our standing programs, like the road improvement, stormwater management.
Oh, it is.
Right.
The township budgets $60,000 every year for the purposes of removing dangerous trees. And we spend that.
Right, and the question is that enough?
Yeah.
Or as a priority, is that something more that we should add to?
Are we spending it all?
Oh, yes.
Well, and the problem we have now is we're still dealing with the aftermath of the ash borer. I mean, there's how many thousands of ash trees that are
That's
still...
priority, though.
Right.
We always prioritize
Right.
that, I think.
But you're not going to get every last ash tree. I mean, it's just, sadly, within two or three years, the wind will bring them down. I mean, it's... But I agree with you. It just seems like it's really become a problem in the last 5 years. I mean,
Yes.
growing up around here, I don't ever recall there being these many dead, even the ash borer aside. I mean, the number of dead maples and oaks you see these days is just, I don't know whether there is some truth to the climate change or there's some other pest, but you never used to see as many dead trees as you see now.
Okay, moving on. Unfinished business, there is none. New business, discussion concerning local roadways.
Yes, on the agenda, I have 3 items with regard to local roadways. In part, this is in reaction to a request from a resident along Mount Plain Drive to be able to discuss the process by which private roads are incorporated into the public road system. Mr. McDonough could not be here tonight, and he will be at a future meeting. But the other part of this was Mrs. Merrill had asked us, and rightly so, to update council as to regard to the outcome from the workshop we had when we discussed minimum maintenance roads and private roads and public road system. So I still think we ought to go through this, and then when Mr. McDonough can be here, we can discuss specifically Mount Plain. But as you'll recall, what came out of that workshop and the solicitor's opinions in the docket, as well as my report, the fact of the matter is there are only two types of roads in Peters Township. There are public roads and there are private roads. And public roads can be, the ownership can be with the state of Pennsylvania, or they can be with the township. But those are roads that we own, we're responsible for their upkeep, and we're, in the same regard, we're liable for anything with regard to their condition. Private roads are owned by the adjacent property owners, and they become responsible for maintaining those roads. So for a road to transition from being private road to a public road, that process is governed by Ordinance 160, and basically what it says is that it requires a petition of the property owners who abut the street requesting the change. It requires that a review be done by the solicitor and the township engineer. The solicitor for determining what the current status of the road is and whether there are any legal impediments to the township accepting the road. The engineer is responsible for establishing an estimated project cost. There's a public hearing that is required where the solicitor and engineer present their findings, as well as to accept testimony from residents along the street. And for the street to be accepted, it's required that it meet township road specifications and be eligible for the Pennsylvania Liquid Fuels Program. So what that means in part is that it has to have at least a 33-foot right-of-way, and it has to, if it doesn't connect to another plan, it needs to have a cul-de-sac on it that meets the Liquid Fuels Program standards. Now, having said that, if you read Ordinance 160, one of the things Ordinance 160 says is that it's in the public interest to make private roads public, and it provides flexibility in how to do that. So, you know, some roads that have been taken over, there have been accommodations made for things like the size of cul-de-sacs. But the other thing it says is that the cost and expense of the improvements are to be borne by the adjacent property owners. And Ordinance 160 is a revision that was done based upon a prior ordinance, Ordinance 108, in which the township was accepting roads in their current condition, and as Mr. Smith and I have determined, taking on the responsibility for any improvements to those roads at some future date. And so Ordinance 160 was enacted, I believe, to put the burden on the current property owner to bring the road up to township specifications before we take it over. So under Ordinance 160, all of these roads have been accepted. They have all resulted in assessments to the adjacent property owners, with the exception of Joe Matt. And I believe, and I don't know this for a fact, that the reason why Joe Matt did not require an assessment is just as now it does not have drainage, nor does it require drainage on either side of the road. And it's, you know, it's a simple street, and I think the township at that point in time had no problem accepting it in its status. So,
Paul, there's one other way that would affect Mount Blaine from Nevin to Old Oak. If you recall back many, many years ago when the developer was developing those houses up on the top of the hill. The developer offered to develop that even though it was not his property, and the homeowners turned it down.
Yes, that's
Twice.
one of, and that's not only, that's true for the entire length of Mount Plain, because he made that offer before
He did.
before 2009, and when the residents of Mount Plain at that point in time, and they have changed, like everywhere else in the community, they have changed. At that time, wanted to maintain their privacy and not have that interconnection done. So in 2009, when the upper section of Mount Plain was converted to a public road, there were assessments, and it was improved down to Nevin. So I mean, that's the process by which a private road becomes public. Like I say, I think we're going to have this discussion again later in July, because I do think there's going to be interest from the people at Nevin to talk about this, because what they're looking for is assistance from the township to make this happen. They would like to see the township pick up a share of the cost of that improvement. So,
Mr. Lauer, can you articulate how many private roads that have not been accepted we still have? Do you have any idea, Mr. Zamitis or Mr. Lauer?
A handful, yeah. I don't know the exact number. But
I just wondered.
Between 5 and 10, I'd say.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there was what kind of potential there would be out there if we begin to talk about it, that people might come forward.
So for us to contribute on the cost, it would require a change in the ordinance?
well, no, because the ordinance, if you read the ordinance, it provides, it's upfront states it's in the public interest to have public roads and not private roads. And it implies that the council should have at its disposal any tool that would help that to occur. Having said that, at the very end, what it says is there should be assessments. So, it talks about, and when it talks about these costs, it talks about all costs. Legal costs, engineering costs, construction costs. But
Paul, are those assessments that are reflected up there, are they the entire cost?
No, they were not.
No.
I don't think so.
But I think I was going to say on Mount Plain, I think that may well be.
It was close. There was a couple $1,000s that we
And didn't we
contributing.
didn't we spread out? They could pay over a
Yeah.
period of time.
With over 5 years, and we said
5 years was it?
Yeah.
And if I recall, that we have a couple that
we
were
have
laggards in paying within the 5-year period.
we have one outstanding assessment on Sunnydale Lane for $500
$500.
for years and years and years.
There are liens on the property,
Yes.
so if the property gets sold,
Yes.
you get paid.
But I think I'm right in saying that every one of those was a negotiated cost.
I don't know that. I'd have to go back and verify that.
It just seems to me every time we talked about it, we came up with something.
We were haunted, and I think followed a concept that a third was not an unreasonable circumstance to deal with. And therefore, the property owners on both sides would be paying 2/3 of the cost of the township.
Are there grants available?
Well, let's talk about that, because
See, I'm segueing into.
this was a very good segue.
I read this, that's why.
So there are these streets that we would call minimum maintenance road, and again, that terminology is a fiction. It is not incorporated anywhere into the ordinance, and it's not incorporated into the acceptance of the street. So one of those was Joe Matt, that was taken under Ordinance 160, and again, Ordinance 160 says we only take roads that are up to our standard. So this is clearly a township road, and we're responsible for it. So this road is incorporated into the 2021 township paving program, and it will be paved this year. And what we're going to be doing is limited base repair in conjunction with an asphalt overlay. There are no storm sewers on this street, and so therefore this is a very simple project. And so this particular road's going to be improved this year.
Is that street dead end, gentlemen?
No.
No, it connects.
Okay, so it connects, so there's.
Center Church to Long.
Yeah.
Okay. I know what it is, I just.
So the next set of streets are Laurel Drive and Pinewood Drive, and these were taken under the previous ordinance, Ordinance 108 in 1972, where we took over streets that did not meet the township specifications at the time. So as part of this year's budget, we included money for the purpose of developing engineering drawings to improve those streets. Those drawings, at least the initial go-around, are complete. They are being reviewed by Mark for the purposes of determining their adequacy. One of the things about this road is that that's going to be a challenge is we need to acquire property for a turnaround on the one end of Laurel Drive. And so once we have these drawings in place, I think we're going to begin a serious conversation with the property owner there. We anticipate construction of this project to take place next year. One of the things that we've identified is a grant program that is operated by the Washington County Conservation District for low-volume roads, and this is kind of like a poster child for that program. And as of right now, we're estimating the cost of this project to be in excess of $200,000. So our goal is, our hope is that at least a portion of that cost can be offset by that grant. But if that's not possible, I think it's Mr. Zemaitis' position and mine that we need to move ahead with this project because we own that road and it needs to be improved.
And in this particular case, there are issues with stormwater removal, so that's why the cost seems to be a little bit more.
Well, actually, there's no storm sewers there, and the storm sewer system needs to be constructed, and that's why it may well qualify for a grant from the Conservation District. But one of the things as they developed the plans that we were pleasantly surprised to find out is that the easements across the property to allow us a point of discharge down towards the creek actually exist. Good. So we have the ability to put in that system, and again, in fairness to everyone, we need to be meeting with the residents to talk to them what the implications of that are, because there's going to be a pipe discharging in somebody's backyard into that stream. So the next road is Maplewood Drive, and this was acquired in 1972, again under Ordinance 108. And what's different about this road than all the other roads we're looking at is that it not only serves the residents who live on that street, it serves that entire plan. And it's a primary means of ingress and egress. Upgrading Maplewood Drive is also going to require an engineering study, and we're proposing to include that in next year's budget with the idea that we would incorporate this road improvement into the 2023 road improvement budget. Because of the volume of traffic on this road, we do not believe that it would qualify for the low volume road program from the Conservation District, and so therefore the costs associated with doing these improvements would be on the township.
Well, what does the old ordinance say? When we saw one at 160, what does 108 say?
What 108 said is that we're going to take this road over, and we're taking it over in the condition that it is. And so we accepted those. And then if you look at the resolutions by which we actually accepted the streets, they say something to the effect is that we may improve it at some point in the future, or we shall improve it at some point in the future. And so I think we own these. They're no different than any other road, except their condition is deplorable,
Well, we went through this in the workshop and the investigation that Paul and John went through. We ended up understanding that for decades, minimum maintenance roads were advocates of Mr. Silvestri's premises. And actually, the discussions in the council meetings bore out, in essence, Mike's intent, but the written record did not substantiate that.
Yes, I think you're absolutely correct.
And the important part is how it impacts the residents. This is one of the reasons I was hoping that we could get to a definitive explanation for people. And it seems to be that once the township, under either ordinance, accepts a road, then technically we're responsible for it. And the residents, once it's in the ordinance, may not have to have it improved.
And
Getting it from private to being accepted requires involvement of the residents and their pocketbooks, but once it's in the ordinance as these are, then technically the township's footing the bill. Am I correct?
In a point, if you read what John says, John is of the opinion that either as a matter of public policy or a limitation on the township, that we ought not to be assessing people for these. The thing that I might disagree with John, and I would be curious to follow up on, I think you might have the ability to actually do that, but I don't know how you can make sense out of doing that at this point in time. When you've had a road since 1976 that we own, I don't know how you assess people to improve it.
Well, and this might not be a popular opinion, but for me personally, if the roads are in our ordinance and accepted as a township road, then the answer's done and the township foots the bill. The roads we were talking about, Montblain, Dagmar, some of the other ones that are private now, they're gravel roads. People move there on a gravel road. They knew where they were buying. If they want brought in or accepted, I could see asking those people to contribute.
Oh, and absolutely, and that's the reason why Ordinance 108 was repealed, because council realized after they had taken over a number of these, the liability they had taken on for themselves, and they didn't think that was fair. They wanted the people to pay for the road in front of their house, just like everybody who lives in a housing plan pays for the road in front of your house. So the last one that's in this category is Longview Drive. And again, it was acquired under Act 108, and upgrading it is going to take an engineering study, and we're proposing that be either in 2022 or 2023. Critical to the improvement of that road will be the willingness of the property owner to give us easements to discharge stormwater, because I'm not sure that we have a place to discharge stormwater on this street. And then in addition to that, this is a very long road without a turnaround right now, and it needs to have some type of turnaround so that, in fact, we're not backing out the street. Part of the reasons why I'm suggesting that it be 2023 or 2024 has to do with whether or not we can receive a grant from the Conservation District. This will qualify as a low volume road, and I think if in fact we have success with the Conservation District this year, we might want to push ahead with this and see whether or not we can get this road done as well. So
that makes sense.
So, but that kind of brings us up to date on that.
Thank you very much for explaining that.
The other thing that I wanted to do tonight, because we have confusion with understanding exactly where council is right now with regard to the policy on roadways. And I've asked the fire chief and the police chief and the public works director to be here tonight because they're asking me questions and I can't answer them. And I know Ed and I and Mark are a little bit confused as well. One of the things this township does better than most municipalities is we have policies, and we have policies on just about everything that you could imagine. And for the most part, they provide the guidance we need to speak definitively when we're talking to residents and we're talking to developers about how things are to be handled inside the township. So, one of the policies that exist out there is that residential developments should have multiple means of ingress and egress, and that there needs to be interconnections of roads, and there are to be no dead-end streets. In fact, no dead-end streets is actually incorporated into an ordinance. So we're not clear right now exactly what council's telling us with regard to these streets. And what you need to know is that you get to see residential housing plans at least twice, in a preliminary plan and when the final plans come through. Long before that, we're speaking to developers about what it is they need to do in terms of meet the township's requirements. And one of those discussions is always about the interconnection of plans. And I will tell you this, as a matter of fact, no developer wants to see plans interconnected. If they all had their druthers, there would be a whole series of cul-de-sacs and loop roads. And by the same token, properties that border on vacant pieces of property, nobody wants to see those plans interconnected as well. What we do on a regular basis is to sit down with people and say, your plan can't move forward without those interconnections. So when the Sugar Brook plan came in and the developer came in very early in the process, it's like, if there's not an interconnection, don't even bother bringing the plan in, because Peters Township won't consider that. And what these policies allow us to do is to speak emphatically with regard to what the rules of the road are when we're dealing with outside agencies. So when we are looking at this intersection improvement project up here where the intersection of Bittersweet Circle is with East McMurray Road, one of the options that was presented was this cul-de-sac at the end of Bittersweet Circle. And ironically, this occurred right after the decision with regard to Banner Way. And at that scoping meeting, my response emphatically was, the township would not accept that, because to accept that cul-de-sac would leave that plan with only one way in and one way out, and the township has a very strict and hard policy against multiple ways in and out of the plan. And later that week, had this same discussion with the affected property owner and saying, hey, this is the township's policy. But where I begin to question this is that, you know, when you look at this plan and the fact that Bittersweet Circle is in fact a circle, it really doesn't differ from Juniper Woods, and I'm not quite sure how I'm explaining to that resident that that loop road can't just be a loop road, that it has to connect back to East McMurray Road. I don't know how to differentiate these two. And so we have this policy, but the problem is, from our perspective, is that when residents come in to speak about this and express concerns, we then abandon the policy and don't interconnect plans. So, you know, this is the plan over
Whispering Pines and Woodlands.
Whispering Pines and Woodlands. And so what you're left with is this same kind of thing that we have in Manor Way right now, where there is this short distance between two streets that could be interconnected, and they're not. And so, you know, like if you go over to Manor Way right now, that's the distance between the two streets that have the same name, and you can't do that. And to not interconnect these has implications. So, you know, we're getting ready to build this new fire station, and those blue lines indicate everywhere where you can get within a minute and a half, which is kind of the gold standard for fire service. Because those two roads don't connect, we can't get there in a minute and a half. And so I understand that people don't want it, but I can tell you it affects the services we're able to deliver to those neighborhoods. So, you know, this is down at Anthony Farms, and this is Bethany Drive that comes in cul-de-sacs there. And that cul-de-sac is there because of the concerns expressed by the neighbors up above. But when we did that, we created a cul-de-sac street that can never be extended, that is 1,400 feet in length, which violates the policy about interconnecting plans, but also we have a policy that says no road should be longer than 600 feet. And And so, we have these situations, and like I said, I think we're a little frustrated because every one of these, through the whole process, from when it starts, is only a source of confrontation between us, developers, and residents. And when we get to the end of that process and we don't follow through, I don't know how to explain that to people. Because we tell people we're following the township's policy. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been getting my ear bent by the chiefs and Ed and the public works director about what it is we need to do to be able to explain the importance of these. And I told them they could come to the night's meeting and address that directly with council so that we all can get on the same page, so that going forward, we don't go through a process that's years in developing a plan, only to find out when we get to the end that we're not doing what it is we told people we would. So, I don't know. Chief?
You want me to put a target on my chest here? Because I think I'm the most contemporary.
That was a 4-3 vote, so you're not alone.
No, sir. I mean,
I would just say, when I first heard that the Manor extension was not going to be made, I was somewhat dumbfounded to hear that. Because I thought the last time we talked about it, I had written a letter to council saying these are the benefits from my perspective of this, from a public safety perspective in relation to law enforcement at a minimum. And I know Chief agrees with me. I believe Joe agrees with me. That's one particular development that we have to actually go into Upper St. Clair. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. We have to go into Upper St. Clair to get to those houses. And in a medical emergency or in a police or fire emergency, that's a lot of wasted time to do that. And I just don't understand how that happens. In the short time that I've been here, as I drive around and go through the developments, and I get to a road and I can see another road, I don't understand how we got there. And I wasn't here for all the historical stuff. I don't understand it, but I just think it makes sense. I understand from the perspective of the people who live there. They don't want that. And speaking to Manor Way specifically, I think you're more likely to have people from the old side come through the new side than the new side to go through the old side. I just think that's exactly the way that's going to play out. It may be both, but who's going to go through Juniper up that hill? That hill is a significant hill, especially in the wintertime, and I would let Joe Hurston address that. But beyond that, it is just, again, from my very narrow perspective in public safety, law enforcement, it would benefit us tremendously to have those connectivities in place. And also, as Mr. Lauer indicated, when we do talk to the public about these, we thought we had some clear direction and delineation, only to find out that there's going to be an exception or an accommodation made for that very specific statute. I'm still speaking statey language, ordinance. So that's all I would have to say. I don't know if Chief McLaughlin or Joe Hurston want to address council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And just to mirror on the public safety side, I think it was 2018 that this plan first came to council. We discussed a lot of these same points, and not being in the current position that I am now, I got to work with my predecessor heavily in this project, and getting some of the data that I actually got to see again from some of the residents. And it's not often that we find residents that get to speak the same language as public safety professionals, but in reading this email, I was really kind of flattered, to be honest. It was very well thought out. It took into consideration drive distances, drive times, response times. And in the fire service, that's what we live by. We live by our response times to communities and the number of people that we can get there and how quickly we can get them there.
Yeah, what Chief McLaughlin's referring to, there's a letter of correspondence in your docket.
We've had many instances. It's happened before. It will happen again. We always have dead-end roads. We have just last week on Shady Lane was flooded out to the point where it was not passable. But with one way in and one way out of Shady Lane, that entire neighborhood was without the ability to come in or out of that neighborhood until the storm drains were cleared, which actually did happen in a very timely manner. But trees down, fires at the end of streets. It's happened before. It will happen again, regardless of this one getting connected or other ones getting connected. But to stay ahead of this in every plan that gets built from here on out, it improves the service, I think, to the residents on both sides. Sometimes we're tasked with making the unpopular decisions, and sometimes in negotiations, when both parties aren't happy, we know we've come to a good decision. It does heavily weigh on our ISO rating. It basically brings government back to what it is in protecting people and property. And we look at the people on Manor Way, and we want to protect them in the same way that we can protect people on East McMurray Road, be able to get them in and out. We've had fires in this neighborhood as well. March 30th, 2012, 2754 Locust Drive. According to some response times that I've seen, we should have went Thompsonville Road to Juniper Way and up that way. But, you know, I can't say I'm upset. I can't say I'm disappointed. It's mere of a kind of a surprise, I think, and how we've come together as a community to develop these plans, the many plans that we get, and the hard work that Ed puts in to make sure that, hey, it affects the mail service, it affects school buses, it affects snow plows, it affects emergency response, police patrol, it affects everybody in this room some way, somehow. So just my 2 cents on the thing, and if there's anything else.
That's kind of ironic is that they had an individual who did a CPR class with the fire department who lives up in the plan, and that individual was complaining about the length of time it took an ambulance to get to a critical emergency. And Chief McLaughlin said, well, how do you feel about the interconnection? Oh, no, I don't want the interconnection. I just want the ambulance to get there quicker.
Joe Herson, Public Works Director. On behalf of the Public Works Department, opening up that connection would make a safer alternative to the way we provide services. In January, we had a plow truck removing snow from Franklin Drive. When he came over the top of the hill, he approached the vehicle attempting to fishtail his way up the hill. Subsequently, the plow truck impacted a utility pole before causing moderate damage to the fishtailing vehicle. Point being, Locust Drive is so much steeper than Franklin Drive. So opening that connection up would make a safer way for our operators to treat those steeper roads.
So what you're saying is you would start at the bottom and work your way up as opposed to now when you have to go downhill.
And one of the things you're going to get from Mr. Herson is that there's a request, because we're having these problems on these steep streets, sliding down them when we're going to plow, and you're having individuals who can't control the truck because it just is sliding and it's hitting vehicles. And so we're going to be talking about posting some of those steep roads for no parking during winter months. So.
Thank you.
All right, well, I gotta speak my mind here, because I do feel as though my decision was very much a COVID-driven decision. You're going to look at me like, what the hell are you talking about, Mr. Lewis?
And a side effect of the vaccine?
No. It's a situation that we've been told for a year and a half. We're doing this for your safe reasons. I sat here that night and listened to the story that there weren't any residents that lived up in there that wanted this connection. I wanted the connection. But I voted no because I just felt it was one more instance where government was telling a bunch of people that felt they could take care of themselves that they're wrong, and you got to do this. You got to wear your mask. You got to do this. You got to do that. You can't get on a bus without having a mask on. That's why I did it. It is stupid to see what we've created there. But it ought to be stupid to the people that live up on those streets. And they ought to be in here saying, guys, you're right. We need to connect them. But I didn't think it was our decision that night, in absence of any resident living up in that area, that the only way we can access it is to go into Upper St. Clair. Standing up and saying we wanted it. This letter, excellently, I agree with you.
I think she's here. This is your chance.
I wouldn't have known that, but okay.
Gloria Steffen, 2840 Locust Drive. I am the author of the letter that I sent to Mr. Edzoo. I am absolutely in favor of the connector, and I was extremely disappointed that the vote somehow changed, that it was voted down. I assume you've all read my letter.
Excellent letter.
Thank you. And I actually had not pulled my file before I wrote the letter until this evening, when I pulled out from Mr. Mark Zematitis.
Now that you know how to pronounce it, you'll never forget.
My name was similar, so I apologize. Of October 2017, if you go to the back, there were 5 pros listed for the connector, and only one con, which was listed at the time as potential for increased traffic through the existing neighborhood. So it was a potential for the perception that there may be increased traffic through the neighborhood, which I contest would not happen. We would see our residents in the current plan using the Juniper Hills access to have a safe exit and entry for personal reasons and for emergency vehicles in and out. And I also, in this original thing, was talking about children playing on the street. Since we had our last council meeting, I have yet to see a child play on our street. We currently have no residents below the age of, I don't know what. There are no children in our neighborhood that play on the street. They play on Franklin. So that's all I have to add to what I've already written. And I'm open to any questions you may have. My husband is here as well.
Do you talk with anyone in the neighborhood, ma'am? What do your neighbors say about this?
Well, the interesting thing, no, we really haven't talked to our neighbors other than across the street. They're new neighbors. They've just moved into the neighborhood about 3 years. There happened to be one of the people that came down the hill in the winter and slid into a neighbor's yard. They were at the meeting that we had the last time. And interestingly, Mr. Schneider, when he did his petition, whatever it was, nobody knocked on our door, so I think they already knew where we were on the issue. So I don't know how many signatures he got or where they were from, but anybody that doesn't live above the top of the hill really has no dog in the race here. So.
Well, it's all still part of the plan then.
Well, it is, but it would be of no advantage to anybody that lives at the top of Locust to use the Juniper Hills access.
I see your point.
Go out on 19.
Exactly. Exactly.
See, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. There is no one that is going to use that access to go through that plan. I mean, it doesn't take you anywhere.
No, one is going to go through the Juniper.
Exactly. You're not going to go up there to go to 19.
Our plan off that steep is at 17% grade to get out from where they could go to Thompsonville Road. Plus, you're now creating another dead-end plan when you have an opportunity to correct that situation. Creating another problem for the Juniper Hills residents. They now have a dead end.
Thank you.
But to be honest with you, I did not bring this to council for the purposes of rehashing Banner Way. And if council wants to revisit that was fine. My concern is, from the standpoint of the planning department, is what is it that we should be telling developers?
I think interconnectors are vital and important. And I did vote against the Anthony Farms. I regretted it the night I voted against it, and I said I will never vote against another interconnect.
And I don't disagree with you, Mr. Berquist. I think it's important that we look at those. But I think one of the problems that I struggle with is that we have existing developments, like you pointed out Bethany Drive. Bethany Drive existed before Anthony Farms. Was there a sign at the end of the cul-de-sac that said cul-de-sac will be extended? Here's part of the problem I have with this. If that sign wasn't there, and then you say to people, this is going to happen, it disrupts their lives. Manor Way, that whole issue, we didn't have the road in the right place. There was a whole nother issue besides just the connection. I think the township has some accountability to make sure that people understand that that's going to happen. I mean, it was just, I don't even know how many years ago we started putting cul-de-sac may be extended in these
And we have
plans.
people taking those signs down.
Well, I understand that, but I'm saying, and part of the problem is the developers. Okay, the developers develop, and then the people who sell the homes say, oh, buy on this cul-de-sac. And people think they're buying on a cul-de-sac when in fact it'll be extended. I don't disagree that the idea of interconnectivity is helpful. I'm just saying, where people aren't being communicated, and then now all of a sudden, property has to be extended, and people get upset. I can understand.
But if you have a plan that has a dead-end street that goes to the edge of the property, or you have a cul-de-sac and there's not a home on the end of that cul-de-sac, it seems to me to be painfully obvious that the intent is to extend that. If there was a home, if you look at what has occurred, on this plan here, it's obvious it can never be extended. But if you have a road, as Bethany did, that dead-ended
into a farm,
that it's going to be extended.
I think you're right. If you're next to open land, it makes sense. But you also talk about the woodlands and Whispering Pines. The developer, he wanted to squeeze an extra house there. He wanted to reduce the frontage. The house at the top of that cul-de-sac is, 20 feet, 25 feet from the road, from the cul-de-sac. If you put a road through there, you'd have to figure out another way to do it. And he came for accommodations, and that's part of the issue.
Well, I think whenever there's a chance to connect neighborhoods, we should be connecting them.
Absolutely.
I mean, that should be a policy that's not even up for debate, And I mean, I'm sorry if someone moves into a neighborhood and there's a cul-de-sac there and there's not a house at the end of it. I mean, they're at least on notice. They should be. And maybe I'm speaking as a real estate lawyer. That's the first thing I would go and look.
No, but you're right. It always amazes me. People are about to make the largest investment of their lives. In most instances, is the house they purchase, and they don't do research.
Right. I mean, it's not hard. You go to the recorder's office.
Research figuring out what kind of refrigerator to buy.
Right. I mean, you go look at the recorded plan. It'll tell you, if the road goes to the end of the property. If there's.
But they don't.
Right. No, I know.
But that's not our problem. That's not our problem.
Well, but it becomes our problem.
Yes, sir.
In the back end.
Can I speak? Sure. Does your wife allow you? Keep quiet.
Michael Steffen, 2840 Locust Drive. Forgive me, just a couple of points. Mr. Zook, in your presentation 3 years ago, you showed a right-of-way that the township abandoned between Marble and into the Juniper Woods plant. There was also, we believe, we were told at one time, Locust Drive would have been extended to Marble on the cul-de-sac there, but a house was built on the right-of-way and it was not allowed to go through. So there has been times in the past that there has been a plan for our community to be connected. We, of course, are very much in favor of it. I ask you all to please visit, see what the hill is like. Please wait till December, January, or February, and it's snowing, and you have to come down there, and the anti-lock system never lets go. It's pretty scary.
And this is where I will agree with you, is as much as this is a problem for Mr. Hersant and the guys who drive those snowplows, I don't know how people deal with that road in the wintertime.
In the winter, we have to back up. We live almost at the end. We're the next last house on the right. We're at 2840. We back up to Mr. Bench's driveway. He's at 2842. And we take a run for the top of the hill. And
you have to.
The Public Service Department knows what happens.
You don't.
We're taking it in blind faith to go up that hill at those speeds.
And I think you're right. I've talked to people who live there, and they've talked about the fact that people slide into the yards, you can't get up and you can't get down. But also part of what they're pointing to is trucks you can't pass each other on the road either. So we're back to the whole width of the road.
Well, the road meets the standard. It's 18 feet.
It meets the minimum standard.
It meets the
Put the minimum
standards.
word in there.
And Juniper Woods is no different, as I understand, right?
Correct.
So it would be better to have another access, especially for school buses. My goodness. When we moved in, they wouldn't dare send a school bus down there until Officer Jim Stevick moved in, and all of a sudden we had school buses coming down the hill.
What's the grade of that road, Paul?
18%, sir.
It's 18.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. It's very steep.
And we have
That's
it right
in their
here.
document
It's in the
from
document.
2017.
Yeah, right here. It's one of the steepest in the township, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Steep.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask that this be put back on the agenda for the next meeting, because I think this needs to be investigated and discussed further. Do you need a motion to that effect?
I second
Well,
it.
can we do that? I don't, be honest with you, I don't know whether I will be here at the next meeting. Is there a chance we can do that in the second meeting in July?
Sure.
That's fine.
What do you suggest it be put back on the agenda, to reopen the issue of the connectivity?
Exactly.
All right.
Are you talking
condemnation.
about putting the ordinance on?
No, I'm talking about the using eminent domain to take that 75 feet or whatever it is.
And that's simply a discussion as opposed to...
No, I want it back on the agenda.
You want the ordinance back on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you need a motion to that effect, or?
When you say put the ordinance on what we voted down
Right,
last time.
right.
We want to revisit that vote.
Okay.
But I think more importantly, too, you want clarification as to what council's position is on interconnection.
Yes, and I think we, just as you have in front of you, I believe, a policy manual for the library, I would like to be able to draft up a policy and have it adopted by resolution so that, in fact, we're on firm footing
That's
when
fine.
we're
That's
speaking to
fine.
people.
I think if we fix that ordinance and bring that we're clarifying it with that. Because I think, at least from what I'm hearing here, there's not a lot of disagreement about what the policy should be. But we'll make it very clear.
Well, I have a slightly different perspective than Mr. Kozer. I'm all in favor is if a new plan's going to get developed and there's a potential to connect, that should be the policy. I don't necessarily agree that it has to connect, if that makes sense. So I'm all for the temporary cul-de-sac, but I'm not saying that it has to ultimately connect when the other property decides to get developed. And the only reason I'm saying that is that there might be reasons why you don't want to connect.
Oh, and I would not disagree with you in that there could be a plan, and we have these, where there
or
are
the neighboring party files a subdivision plan, right? He just wants one lot at the end of the cul-de-sac. He's entitled as of right to develop his property, right? So he could put a house there, then it's going to get rid of all the connectivity.
No, but that never happens, because what we require is that cul-de-sac go up to the edge of the property.
Right. And so what happens if the adjoining property that's not developed comes in and says, here's the cul-de-sac and here's my line. I just want to build 3 houses right here.
I just think that's going to happen so rarely.
Huh?
We don't grant the subdivision because he has to have,
if they meet,
he has to have connectivity too.
You have the potential for the same.
I just think that there could be situations where
Oh, there may be, but that's...
You don't want that to happen.
Well, and that's
I
what...
think those are the anomalies.
And I have no problem with doing what we've been doing, and that is put a temporary cul-de-sac in, fine. I think that when it comes to connecting it, I think unless there's a compelling reason against doing that we should do it. But
I would agree.
But there could be. I mean, obviously there were a couple of these. Maybe not this one, but over the years, I'm sure that there were cul-de-sacs that we just didn't connect
because
for some reason or another.
Because one of the reasons why that could occur is that we actually attempt to get multiple connections if we can. And it may well turn out that when the neighboring property gets developed, one of those connections doesn't make sense when the other one does. And so we've actually had that situation.
I mean, maybe
So
the land doesn't lay right. you know?
No, absolutely. Well, and that's,
Something like that.
We'll fix it.
Yeah. But I'm okay with what Frank said, except I think that there should be some discretion. If it doesn't, we can't do
All right,
it.
let's move on. Okay, next item is acceptance of Peters Township Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
So one of the things that's in your docket is the comprehensive annual financial report for the year. What council needs to do is to accept that.
so moved.
Second.
Discussion? Favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
One of the things I would point out to you, we received a letter from the Government Finance Officers Association, and what it says in part is that a special Triple Crown medallion recognizes your government receives all 3 GOFA awards for fiscal year 2019. The fact of the matter is, Peters Township is the only municipality in Pennsylvania to receive all 3 awards.
Could you send that to the Friends of Peters Township?
Yeah, please.
Now, is this available on our website?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Do you think we could put the auditor's letter and that in the quarterly newsletter that we do through Peters, whatever that, what's the name of that magazine?
In community.
Yeah, in community. Because I think that's something that I think residents would like to know.
Well, you know what? I'll talk to Tom DeMar because he's in the process of putting together that
Yeah,
magazine.
put an article in there about it. I mean, that's newsworthy.
Send a copy to Upper St. Clair.
Yeah. Okay. Approval of Brookwood Place.
Get in touch with
Amendment number-
Harry, who's already left for his deadline. But
We'll get Harry later. Approval of the Brookwood Place Amendment number 3 is shown in drawings prepared by Sparduti Land Surveying, March dated June 3, 2021. So the Donegal Land Partners LLC.
So this is the third amendment, and all this is establishing the property lines based upon the exact location of the foundation walls. So this is for the latest townhouse that's under construction there. So it's my recommendation that council approve this plan.
So moved.
Some second.
Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approval of the Arlecchino subdivision plan number 2 is shown on drawings prepared by Keystone Surveying and Mapping, dated May 25, 2021, for Thomas A. Robinson Family Limited Partnership.
This is a subdivision that's being requested by Thomas A. Robinson Family, as well as South Hills Bible Chapel. What it is doing is simply transferring that small piece of property in dark blue from the Bible Chapel to Mr. Robinson.
The purpose of that is?
Part of the Arlecchino's dumpster and 2 or 3 parking spaces reside on this property, and to clean it up.
I'll make a motion subject that we approve it subject to any conditions and whatever that were placed on it.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Planning commission.
Okay, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, approval of Davis OGG lot line revision number 1 is shown on drawings prepared by Keystone Surveying.
So moved.
Second.
That's just moving a line for
Yeah,
landscape.
they're moving a line, that's all. Okay, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of Juniper Woods lot line revision shown on drawings prepared by PVE dated June 3.
All we're doing here is moving the line so someone can build a balcony, right?
Right.
Still have enough open space.
Correct.
All right, move that we approve the Juniper Woods lot line revision.
Second.
Moved and seconded in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
We're kicking butt now.
There's the consent
Award of
agenda.
a bid for the maintenance of HVAC equipment for various township facilities.
Do you want to handle this?
Yeah, sure. So the township currently is at the end of its 3-year contract to maintain HVAC systems in 7 buildings. This is the bid for the 7 buildings. That does not include the municipal building. Heranic Sheet Metal is currently is our current contractor. I would say they've performed repair work adequately. It was my recommendation that we award a bid to them for the next 3-year contract, during which we'll pay a lot more attention to ensuring that preventive maintenance is performed in an adequate manner.
Second.
Discussion?
It's a lot cheaper.
Yep. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Not in the end.
Yeah, the municipal building is bid out separately. It's a Schneider Andover control system in this building that makes it a lot more complicated, and really there's very few contractors who can do this locally. Combustion Services has done it. You notice the cost is higher for this building. I would point out there are software upgrades to the Andover control system included in this bid, spread out over 3 years, that'll buy us another 18 years with that control system. So that's the reason you're seeing the increased cost. But it's my recommendation we award a bid to Combustion Services for the municipal building.
Second.
Discussion. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, payroll and bills.
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed payroll and bills. Payroll for the current period, $283,000. Comp payable, $447,000. Mostly routine, pre-approved capital and operating expenses. There is a credit card statement for May of $12,400. I move that we approve these.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You had some comments, Mrs. Merrill?
I did have a question. One thing that kind of stood out for me, we're paying for sanitary units that are stationed at McMurray Elementary and the middle school. Why are we paying
That's
for them?
the same question I asked Mr. Rao, and we're having a discussion about that. It's because they're being used by the youth sports. In the past, the school district has assumed that cost, but I have begun a discussion with the school district.
Thank you
about
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for picking that up.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Correspondence, we need to discuss either of those items.
Well, I just want to point out, there's a letter in here from the Department of Agriculture. They have a vaccine program designated to deal with the problem with rabies in raccoons. They will be flying fixed-wing planes across Peters Township somewhere between the 19th of August and the 31st, dropping baited rabies vaccine for the raccoons.
All of our council members are COVID inoculated.
I think you'll be safe.
I'm just curious, was this in process?
Yes.
Or was this a product?
No, the two occurred simultaneously.
Is this baiting, is it dangerous for your pets?
No.
No?
Not really, no.
Okay.
Reports, anybody need to talk about any of them?
Two questions. An observation under planning, 11 private pool permits this month. Second, Mr. Zamitis, under engineering, there was an item that said a stop control at Ivy and Bower Hill. Can you expand a little bit on what's going on there?
We had a request from a resident to look into that. There's limited sight distance over that crest if you're on Ivy looking to Bower Hill.
And there is a stop at Ivy.
There is, yes. So we were asked to put one on Bower Hill.
Oh, wow.
So we had Mike Mudry go out. We haven't gotten a full report from him yet, but he's going to measure sight distance and take a look and see.
They could cut the bushes down.
Absolutely.
One thing we noticed.
Solution.
Yeah.
The cheaper solution.
Thank you. I just wondered because it seemed odd to me. Thank you.
The one that I would like to put out to council is in the fire department report, and it has to do with a response to a person who had a heart attack. You know, we received CARES money, and we used that CARES money in part to replace the cardiac monitors in the fire department, as well as to purchase automated CPR devices, as well as replace the AEDs that are in the buildings, as well as at the fire station and in the police cars. And on May 21st, you kind of had an example of the level of service that for critical emergencies that is somewhat unique to Peters Township. There was an individual in front of a local business who collapsed with a heart attack, and there was a bystander who came to assist who was trained in CPR, and then that was followed up by a police officer who showed up and had that AED available to them to assist in reviving the patient. That was immediately followed by a fire crew who had a paramedic on board, and because of their ALS capabilities, they were able to do cardiac monitoring, administer medications, do advanced airway support. And they also utilize those newly acquired auto pulse, those automated CPR devices. And shortly after the AED and the auto pulse were used, the patient began to breathe on their own and had a heartbeat, and Peters Township EMS transported that individual to a hospital, and they were discharged a few days later, alive and recovering. So, this was all possible because there was a trained bystander who was willing to step in and do something, and the training and equipment that the township has provided its staff made that possible. So I just think that was important for council to understand.
Thank you for bringing that up.
So we should give that person some sort of a recognition.
Well, the fire department intends to try to do something.
That would be really very nice. Miscellaneous.
I have distributed the Peters Township Library Policy and Procedures Manual. It'll be on the next agenda for adoption. If you look through it, have any questions or concerns, email Ms. Love with those, and we'll try to get those addressed by the next meeting. She will be here as well as the new Assistant Library Director, so that you have a chance to meet her as well.
This is the only one I have. Do you have one?
Sorry, take that.
You know what? I
can take mine. Come on, Frank.
No, I didn't. This was here by my, that was.
We have another.
Just like the forks on the right and the knives on the left?
I'll tell you what, Jim, you can have mine.
No, I got these.
We have plenty here. Not a problem.
Yeah.
I would also remind people that this Wednesday, there's a concert in the park, followed by fireworks. So.
Could I ask
How would
Mr.
you
Lauer?
position that? Because if we're all in the...
Is the music still starting at 7?
It's starting at its normal time, and the fireworks are starting at 9:30, and the fireworks will be shot off at the same location they always are, which may have to cause people to move to be able to see them well.
Okay.
Hopefully no trees will fall down from the repercussions of the fireworks.
We tried acoustic music at the last concert in the park, and it didn't work very well.
Do we always have fire?
The speakers they were using for their voice were pretty bad.
Yes.
Paramedics, let's say?
Yeah, the police will be there, fire department will be there.
Do we do that for the concerts? Not the fire, but the paramedics or not?
No.
Okay.
We're at the largely attended. We have a couple of the larger concerts that draw more of a crowd.
That's what I mean. There should be something there.
Paramedics are there.
Because, time matters, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
I have a question, Mr. Lauer. Have you had a chance to talk to Superintendent French? We had asked a while back if we had any idea what they were doing with the middle school. And also we asked about resident use of the pool. Have you had any conversation with her?
I have not had a conversation with regard to the middle school in the last couple of weeks. I mean, prior to that, they did not have an idea of how that is. They are interested in opening the pool up, but I don't think they have a way to necessarily make that happen.
Hopefully, maybe we can impress upon them that there is some time urgency in the answer to those questions. Okay, anything else for council on miscellaneous? How about next agenda items?
Mr. Zook, will we be having an agriculture committee council, security council at some point this year?
We're trying.
You were going to revamp that.
But let's be clear, though. We have been trying, and we cannot get the initial step in that process is to gather the farmers. Okay. And we have attempted on a couple of occasions to do that, and they have not expressed an interest in meeting with us.
Okay, that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Who have you contacted?
Well, it's
the
three.
This is your update then.
The three big ones.
Yeah, it's the three big ones.
Three big ones?
Yeah.
Trax, Bebout, Simmons.
I saw Mr. Trax just pass away.
Well, there are other people who have farmland.
Those are our active farmers. Those were the folks on our committee initially.
When you say agriculture, does it have to be farming agriculture as opposed to just land like a...
No, it can be just land as well.
You think it would be better to schedule that type of meeting when the fields are fallow.
That's exactly
Well,
what
we
we attempted to do it.
We
Well,
tried.
they always, but they do have like
Yes.
cornstalks and pumpkins.
So you
and-
talked to
but
Trax?
Eventually, they have to be just sitting there.
Trax, Bebout, and Simmons.
Is Trax technically in Peters?
Yes.
Some of it is.
A lot of-
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Thanks for that
agenda?
update.
All right. There being nothing else, we have an executive session
Very brief.
on legal, okay.